Welcome to the Safety Map podcast. I'm Alyssa Decker, founder and developer of the Safety Map framework, and this is where we talk about how safety, not performance, is the foundation of healing. We're talking about healing that goes beyond coping skills and into structural change. I'm so glad you're here. A relationship can feel calm and not be safe. A relationship can have chemistry and still not be safe. A relationship can have good communication language and still not be safe. A relationship can avoid conflict and still not be safe. How do you know if your relationship is safe? Not perfectly, not instantly, not from one moment, but over time, how do you observe if your relationship is safe? We use some observations, some little micro tests of safety, not tests in a manipulative sense, but to notice what is really happening here. What is my body doing? How is my nervous system responding to this other person? We can use safety map observations like what happens when the other person enters the room? What happens when someone speaks the truth? What happens when someone says no? What does it look like when repair is needed? What happens when one person has a very different perspective from the other? That's what we're talking about on today's episode of the Safety Map podcast. Hey, Alyssa here. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Safety Map podcast. If you are enjoying this content, if you're learning something here, or even just identifying with what we've been talking about, please take a moment to subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're currently listening in on. This really helps other people find the content, and it makes sure that you don't miss a single upcoming episode. Thank you so much. Now back to today's episode. Relationships can be calm because they are safe. But they can also be calm because one person has disappeared, or because both people avoid conflict to try to feel more secure. In a safe relationship, there may at times be no conflict because both people feel secure. Or there may be no conflict because one person stops bringing things up. There may be no conflict because one person is appeasing the other. There may be no conflict because one or both people have learned that their needs are too expensive. There may be no conflict because honesty threatens the connection. Peacekeeping in a relationship is not the same as safety. Safety in a relationship means both people can tell the truth and stay connected. Both people can express the reality of what is really going on without the relationship becoming unstable. Conflict can exist without one person needing to disappear or punish or collapse or retaliate. Now, let's talk about some of the things that we often confuse with safety in a relationship. Let's break them down together here in this episode. The first one is this: chemistry is not safety. Chemistry often distracts us from the underlying questions of safety because chemistry is attraction, intensity, familiarity, recognition. Chemistry may also be chaos wearing cologne. Chemistry is not bad. It matters. Attraction matters. Connection matters. There needs to be some level of chemistry in a healthy relationship. But chemistry does not tell us whether someone can repair after an argument. It doesn't tell us if someone can stay curious. It doesn't tell us if that person can tolerate a boundary. It doesn't tell us if they can tolerate discomfort. And it certainly does not tell us if within that relationship we will become more or less ourselves over time. So the biggest green flag, the biggest safety flag in a relationship is not chemistry. It is what happens in the relationship when that relationship has to hold reality. When the hard times come, when the conflict happens, when the floor falls out from underneath you, can the connection remain stable through that? So if you're wondering, am I mistaking chemistry for safety? Here are a couple of questions that you can ask. Do I become more or less myself in this connection? Do I feel like I show up fully as myself, or do I feel as though I have to censor myself? Can this person handle me as a full, real person, or only as the version of me that makes them comfortable? Another thing that we often confuse with safety is communication. Someone can say the right things while their nervous system is silently communicating pressure, contempt, control, defensiveness, or withdrawal. This is why useful communication tools, can be helpful. Good communication language is helpful. Using I phrases is helpful, but safety is not proven because someone can use the right phrases. People can very much use therapy language defensively. They can use therapy language to invalidate someone else's opinion. They can apologize to escape discomfort. They can validate the other person just to escape a conversation. They can even say, I hear you, while silently communicating, please just stop talking. Communication is not just what is said. Communication is the state your words, their words, travel through. So if you're wondering if you are perhaps confusing communication with safety, here are some questions you can ask. What happens in my body when we talk about hard things? Do I soften more over time, or do I brace more? Do I avoid hard conversations because there's a part of me that gets tight and clenched and braced because I don't feel completely safe having that conversation? When we communicate, does it create more honesty, more access to each other's emotional experience? Or does that communication require me to perform? Does it require me to filter my words, my thoughts, my emotions? Or does that communication encourage me to show up as myself with my real thoughts and my real emotions? Now, showing up as your real self with your real thoughts and your real emotions does not mean presenting those things in an unkind way, okay? That is a completely separate issue. But in a conversation, in a healthy relationship, even in a conflict, safety means I can fully participate here without holding back parts of myself. Another thing that we often confuse with safety in a relationship is validation. Now, this is going to hit some of you a little hard. I know it does for me at times. A safe relationship does not require agreement before care becomes available. In other words, a safe relationship does not require every conflict to be solved, every opinion to be the same before we can respect and honor and care for each other. I can care about your emotional needs. I can care about what hurts you. I can care about what delights you while we may still have an ongoing unresolved conflict. I can validate who you are as a person. I can validate that I still love you. I still honor you. I'm still going to show up for you, even in the middle of conflict, because validation does not mean you're right. It doesn't mean I agree. It doesn't have to mean you get your way. It doesn't mean I have no boundaries. Validation means your experience matters enough for me to understand it. What you feel, what you experience matters enough for me to acknowledge it. In other words, I can care about how you felt about this, how it landed for you, even before I decide what I think about it, before I decide if I agree with you. I can stay curious about you and your experience without surrendering my own perspective. I don't have to sacrifice my agency, my thought, my curiosity, my belief in order to validate you when we're in a safe relationship. Here are some questions that you can ask to see if you are confusing validation with safety. Can the other person care about my experience before deciding whether or not they agree with me? And can I care about theirs in the same way? Can we stay connected to each other while holding different interpretations? Now, here's another test of safety in a relationship. In a safe relationship, boundaries protect safety and access. In a safe relationship, boundaries are not punishment. Boundaries become punishment when that boundary comes with threats, with coercion, with an attempt to control someone else's behavior. A healthy boundary says, this is what I can do. This is what I will not participate in. This is what I need in order to stay connected and safe. And if you want to be in relationship with me, this is what that will look like. A healthy boundary is about me, and it is an invitation for the other person to interact with me in that way. Punishment says, I will make you pay for disappointing me. I will remove connection to control you. I will use access or warmth or leverage or agreement to manipulate you. And punishment can be communicated as a boundary. Have you ever heard someone say, well, my boundary is that no one treats me that way? That's not a boundary. A boundary is, if you would like to share space with me, this is the standard of behavior I will accept. The choice is yours. A safe relationship can hold limits. It can hold boundaries without turning them into threats. A safe relationship, for example, can say, I turn my phone off after 9 p.m. And if you want to reach me after that time, leave a message and I will call you back after 8 a.m., right? A person might hear that boundary and respond with demands, with threats, with pressure, rather than respecting the boundary. Here are some questions you can ask. Here are some questions you can ask in your relationship to determine if there is safety in this area of boundaries. What happens when someone says no? Are we both allowed to express and enforce boundaries without retaliation or punishment? Can we have limits in this relationship without collapse or contempt or disconnection? Now, before we look at this in the reverse and look at what are the markers of a safe relationship, I want to point out one more thing. Repair in a relationship, repair after a conflict, is not the apology. Sometimes we hear about repair in a relationship or healthy conflict, and we immediately jump to the end and put a punctuation mark on it, which is if they apologized, everything is fine. If they apologized, we repaired. But sometimes an apology is just used to end the conversation, to shut someone up, to get them to stop talking, because I don't really want to hear what you are saying right now. And so if I apologize, you'll stop talking, right? I'm sorry can mean, in a healthy sense, I understand, I take responsibility, I want to repair and remain connected to you. But in an unhealthy sense, or an apology can mean, please stop being upset. Please let this be over. Please don't make me feel this. Please just let me get away with this. I don't want to take accountability. I would rather make an apology. Sometimes the apology is so much easier than the accountability that we substitute that apology for accountability. And then we call it repair. And it's not. Repair involves taking ownership of what happened. It involves seeking to understand the other person's experience, their emotions, how something landed for them, why they reacted the way that they did. And by the way, just because you understand doesn't mean you have to allow that behavior. Those boundaries are still appropriate. But repairing a connection in a relationship has to involve an attempt to understand the other person. Repair also looks like the connection is restored with more information about each other than we had before. A deepened understanding of each other. And this is where we see exactly what I was saying. An apology is not repair. We can short circuit repair by apologizing or by censoring ourselves, by not speaking up, by appeasing the other person. And when that conflict is over, we understand less about each other. We have less information than we had before. Repair is not just about making the conflict stop. Repair is what helps your system expect something different the next time. Because when you leave that conversation with repair, you've both taken ownership for the parts of that belong to you. You've both increased your understanding of the other person. You've both sought to affirm the other person. Your system learns that conflict with this person is safe. Not pleasant, but safe. I can experience conflict with this person without losing my connection to them. So here are some questions to ask if you're wondering, is my relationship repairing or are we substituting an apology for repair? And by the way, apologies are often part of repair, but they're just the surface. Repair is so much more. So here are the questions. After repair, do we come back to each other with more understanding, or do we just move on only to repeat the same argument later? Now let's talk about a couple of things that are huge safety signals in a relationship. The first one is curiosity. Now, curiosity in a relationship is not interrogation. It's not compliance. It's not asking questions in order to prove my point. And curiosity does not ask harsh and judgmental questions. Safe curiosity in a relationship is reduced defensive certainty. Okay, let me say that again. Curiosity in a safe relationship is reduced defensive certainty. In other words, I am able to come to the table to enter into a conversation with you without being 100% convinced that I already know what happened, how you interpreted it, what you meant, and what should happen next. Curiosity means I can come into that conversation and say, I think this is what happened, but I might be wrong. Am I missing something? Did this land differently than I intended? Help me understand your experience. What was that like for you when I said this thing? True curiosity can tolerate being uncomfortable and remain curious. I can come to you and say, I think I may have messed up. Based on your reaction, it seems like you were really hurt, and I would like to understand what happened. That is very uncomfortable, but that is what true curiosity looks like in a relationship. And when I say that curiosity is a safety signal or a safety green flag in a relationship, that is what I'm talking about. So here are some questions that you can ask if you're wondering how much curiosity is present in my relationship. When something gets uncomfortable, does the other person remain open to understanding your experience? Do they ask questions, or do you ask questions to try to understand the other person's experience, even if that might get uncomfortable? Do questions open up the conversation? Or do those questions turn into a cross-examination? At the end of the day, a relationship is likely growing safer when truth does not threaten connection, when needs do not automatically become burdens, when limits don't become rejection, when repair becomes more available over time, when you become more yourself in the relationship and not less, when curiosity grows and defensive self-protection becomes less necessary, when conflict leads to more understanding, not just more careful behavior. The biggest green flag in a relationship, the best answer I can give you to, is my relationship safe, is not chemistry. It's not perfect communication. It's not never arguing. It's definitely not just validation or saying the right things. Biggest safety green flag in any relationship is when truth and needs and limits and discomfort and disagreement and repair can all exist and grow without the connection becoming unstable. We are consistently growing closer together. We're understanding each other more over time, not less. That is relational safety. Now, if you are trying to understand the relationship patterns that you and your partner have fallen into, or if you struggle to feel safe in relationships in general because of some things that have happened to you in the past, I would love to hear from you. My email address is in the show notes. Feel free to reach out to me anytime and share what's going on. I would love to see if I can help. And while you're in the show notes, go grab the download for the Secret podcast. In those 3 episodes, I'm breaking down how you can begin to understand what your system is doing, what it's protecting, why it's using things like dysregulation and defensive behaviors and patterns that you would rather avoid altogether to keep you safe. It's the first step on the journey of not only understanding yourself and getting on the same page with your system, but also in changing those things that you have felt like were keeping you stuck for a very long time. And before you go, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps other people find this content. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Safety Map podcast. I'll see you next time.